Welcome to the deep dive. We have an absolutely incredible mission for you today. If you're joining us, we don't just skim the headlines here.
Right, we really look for the currents underneath.
Exactly, the hidden currents, the massive tectonic structural shifts that the mainstream financial press is just completely missing while they obsess over the daily ticker tape.
They get so caught up in the noise.
Yeah, they do. So today, we are unpacking a highly confidential, triangulated intelligence dossier. This was compiled by Manal Mehta.
And it is dense.
Oh, it is a massive stack. We are looking at this intelligence alongside premium financial journalism, corporate strategy memos, and some truly cutting-edge frontier science reports.
Which is my favorite part.
Same. So the goal of this deep dive is to act as a second-order oracle. We are listening for the hidden ripples, the secondary and tertiary effects beneath surface-level global events that actually dictate where the capital is flowing.
Right, and the scope of what we're covering today is it's both vast and deeply interconnected. Our mission is to analyze a sudden violent collision that is happening right now.
Right before our eyes.
Yeah, between the illusion of infinite digital disruption and the hard, unforgiving reality of the physical world.
The physical world is fighting back.
It really is. So we're going to examine the rapid commoditization of human creativity and professional advice. We'll look at massive geopolitical energy shocks that are fundamentally rewiring global trade routes, and some truly mind-bending breakthroughs in biotechnology that, honestly, read like science fiction.
It's a lot of ground to cover for you.
It is. But before we get into the weeds, I want to make one thing explicitly clear regarding the nature of our sources today.
Yeah, that's important.
Some of the intelligence in this dossier covers highly politically charged topics.
Right.
This includes controversial foreign policy decisions and corporate ESG mandates. So our mandate here is strictly analytical. We're not taking any political sides, nor are we endorsing the viewpoints of the original source material.
Right, we are just reading the data.
Right. Exactly. Our sole objective is to impartially report on this intelligence and analyze the structural, operational, and financial implications so that you, the listener, have the full picture.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the theme the dossier calls The Revenge of the Physical World.
Such a great title.
It really captures it. Because for the last decade, the prevailing Silicon Valley narrative has been that digital disruptors, software apps, direct-to-consumer websites, they're just going to eat the legacy physical world alive.
Software is eating the world. That was the whole mantra.
Right. But the physical world is fighting back with a vengeance. And it is starting with a massive coordinated revolt in the legacy auto industry.
The dealerships.
Yeah, the dealerships. So Volkswagen is currently trying to launch its new Scout Motors brand in the United States. They are building this lineup of rugged, all-American electric and hybrid SUVs.
They look great, too.
They do, but instead of using their massive existing network of franchise dealerships to sell these cars, Volkswagen wants to sell directly to consumers, bypassing the middleman entirely.
Mimicking the Tesla model.
Exactly the Tesla model. And the traditional dealers are absolutely furious.
Oh, that.
The reporting highlights a dealer in New York named Fred Ippolito. And this is crazy. He actually bought a vacant lot next to his VW dealership 4 years ago, specifically anticipating a new Scout showroom.
He was ready for it.
Right. And today, that lot is still sitting empty. And he, along with a coalition of other dealers, they are filing massive class action lawsuits.
Which they will likely win.
Well, yeah, they were pointing out that state franchise laws protect them from this exact kind of manufacturer bypass.
You see, the mainstream press often covers these dealership lawsuits as just a bunch of legacy middlemen complaining about being left behind by innovation.
Just whining that they're obsolete.
Right. But looking at the structural reality, those state-sanctioned auto franchise laws are perhaps one of the most formidable, legally protected moats in modern American commerce.
A completely protected moat.
Yet you have to look at the history here. These franchise laws weren't created overnight. They were systematically lobbied for over decades, state by state, legislature by legislature, to cement the local dealer's role in the car buying process.
Because they bring in so much money to the towns.
Exactly. Local car dealers are massive economic engines in their communities. I mean, they sponsor Little League teams, they generate massive local tax revenue, and they wield immense political influence at the state level.
You can't just code your way around that.
No, you really can't. Volkswagen isn't just trying to change a business model. They're essentially trying to wage a multi-front, state-by-state legal war against a highly organized, politically connected oligopoly.
And doing it right now, of all times.
Right. And what the intelligence dossier points out is that this direct-to-consumer push is happening at the exact moment that capital markets are completely losing their appetite for funding massive physical infrastructure builds.
Yeah, I saw the parallel the Dossier drew there, but I'd love for you to break it down. Because it connected this automaker struggle to a crypto exchange, which feels like a massive leap when you first read it.
It does seem disconnected at first.
It pointed out that the prediction market odds for a cracking crypto IPO happening by the first quarter of 2026 have completely collapsed, down to something like 5.2%.
Basically zero.
Yeah, basically zero. So how does a digital crypto exchange struggling to go public relate to Volkswagen selling SUVs?
It comes down to market exhaustion and capital intensity. The connection is really about what investors are willing to fund right now.
Okay.
If a purely digitally native company like Kraken, which operates essentially in the cloud with incredibly high theoretical margins and no physical inventory, if they're struggling to find a receptive public market that wants to buy its shares, think about the appetite for a cash-burning hardware company.
It's non-existent.
Exactly. The market is entirely exhausted by the idea of funding digitally native disruptors that are trying to build physical footprints from absolute scratch.
Because it's so expensive.
Brutally expensive.
Yeah.
Building a physical distribution network, acquiring real estate for service centers, hiring mechanics, building the logistics to handle physical trade-ins.
You can't fake that with software.
No.
Oh.
For years, zero interest rates allowed companies to just burn billions of dollars to build these networks. But the market is now signaling that the era of funding those bonfires is over.
The cheap money is gone.
And the disruptors vastly underestimated the sheer capital cost required to overcome that physical dealer moat we talked about.
That makes the trades outlined in this section incredibly clear.
Very clear.
If the direct-to-consumer model is hitting a capital wall, the alpha here is to look at the capital-intensive electric vehicle players who are desperately trying to replicate the Tesla model today.
Right, the ones trying to build the physical network themselves.
Yeah, so the dossier suggests shorting companies like Rivian and Lucid, primarily because their cash burn required to build out their own physical service and delivery infrastructure is just unsustainable in a market that won't give them cheap capital anymore.
They're tracked.
And on the flip side, the play is to buy AutoNation.
Which makes perfect sense.
Every single time a manufacturer's direct-to-consumer effort is blocked in a state court, it just reinforces the legally protected monopoly that massive public dealer groups like AutoNation hold over last-mile auto sales, and crucially, the high-margin vehicle servicing.
Look at the mechanics of a dealership. The front lot where they sell the cars is flashy, right? But the service bays in the back are essentially cash-printing machines.
That's where the real money is.
Absolutely. Companies like AutoNation already have that real estate secured and optimized. Rivian has to buy the land, build the bay, and hire the technicians at a massive loss just to keep their cars on the road.
The physical infrastructure of distribution is incredibly hard to replicate.
It is.
And we are seeing this exact same dynamic, the physical world reasserting its gravity play out in e-commerce logistics.
Oh, the prime effect.
Yes, the unwinding of what the report calls the prime effect. For over a decade, Amazon has psychologically conditioned all of us to expect our online orders to arrive in 2 days or less for free.
We all just got so used to it.
It forced every single retailer on Earth to subsidize wild shipping costs just to stay relevant. But now the consumer data is showing a massive structural reversal.
A total shift.
We are shifting from a demand for fast and free to a preference for cheap and slow. Amazon itself is now frequently offering customers a 7% discount on their order if they willingly select a later arrival date.
I've actually started clicking that option myself.
Me too. And there's a massive 2024 McKinsey survey included in the stack that completely flips the traditional e-commerce script. It shows that shipping cost is now the absolute #1 priority for online shoppers.
Why #1?
Delivery speed, which used to be paramount, has plummeted down to #5 on their priority list.
That's a huge drop.
Over 95% of shoppers explicitly stated they would rather wait 4 to 7 days if the shipping is free, rather than pay a premium for expedited delivery.
People are just tired of paying extra.
But the part that really caught my eye was the impact on returns. Retailers are finding that when delivery takes longer, their product return rates actually drop by 20 to 30%.
Think about the psychology behind that drop in return rates, though.
It's fascinating.
When you remove the instant gratification of overnight shipping, You fundamentally change the nature of the transaction. You filter out the late-night impulsive buyers.
The ones who order 3 sizes of a jacket just to try them on and return 2?
Exactly. Those buyers cost retailers a fortune. By introducing a 4 to 7 day friction period, you attract a much higher intent shopper.
Someone who actually wants the thing.
Right. They actually want the product, they have thought about it, and they're willing to wait for the physical logistics network to deliver it.
Makes sense.
But taking a step back to look at the structural market impact, what we are witnessing is the total unwinding of Amazon's primary competitive moat.
Their biggest advantage.
For the last 10 years, Amazon's dominance wasn't just about having a good website. It was about their absolute logistics supremacy. They could get a physical box to your door faster than anyone else.
And if the modern consumer simply no longer cares about 2-day shipping, that multi-billion-dollar logistics moat is effectively neutralized.
It evaporates.
But if that moat is neutralized, doesn't that completely level the playing field for independent merchants? I mean, if I am running a small boutique online, I don't need a massive warehouse network anymore.
That is the direct secondary effect. If a customer is perfectly fine waiting 5 or 6 days for a package, an independent merchant using Shopify can easily compete with Amazon.
They just use regular mail.
Exactly. They can just use standard postal routing without needing to subsidize expedited air freight. This behavioral shift is incredibly bullish for the Shopify ecosystem because it removes the massive logistical disadvantage small merchants faced.
That's huge for Shopify.
Curiously, it's also highly bullish for Amazon's own bottom line.
Wait, really?
Yeah, if Amazon doesn't have to rush half-empty delivery vans out of the warehouse to meet a 2-day promise, they can optimize their routing. They can wait until a truck is completely full, radically reducing their fuel and labor costs per package.
But there has to be a loser in this scenario.
Oh, there is. The absolute losers here are the premium parcel carriers, specifically FedEx and UPS.
Because they rely on the rush.
The Dossier points out that FedEx has explicitly stated to investors that they want to focus on high-margin, high-value goods, things like smart rings or electronics, not cheap, heavy T-shirts.
Right.
But as overall e-commerce volume shifts away from premium overnight air freight towards slower, cheaper options like the U.S. Postal Service or localized regional carriers, those premium carriers are going to face intense, sustained volume pressure on their most profitable routes.
So people are perfectly willing to wait for a physical package to arrive if it saves them some money.
Definitely.
But the fascinating thing is, they aren't just sitting at home staring at their screens while they wait. They are actually going out into the physical world again.
The mall renaissance.
The dossier highlights a massive resurgence in physical mall traffic, and it is being driven almost entirely by Gen Z.
Which nobody predicted.
But the underlying reasoning the intelligence provides for this trend is actually quite dark. The memo refers to it as economic nihilism.
It is a really sobering psychological profile.
Yeah, break that down.
Gen Z is looking at the current macroeconomic environment. Sky-high interest rates, massive inflation in housing costs, and they feel entirely priced out of traditional large capital assets.
The American dream stuff.
Right. They feel a deep-seated pessimism that they will ever be able to afford a home. So rather than saving for a down payment that feels mathematically impossible to reach, they are redirecting all of that disposable income into what the dossier terms small-ticket escapism.
Small-ticket escapism.
They crave tangible, real-world social experiences that absolutely cannot be replicated on a digital screen.
It completely shatters that old retail apocalypse narrative we've been hearing for a decade, where e-commerce was supposed to turn every physical store into a ghost town.
We thought malls were dead.
Instead, the mall is experiencing a generational renaissance. For a generation that was raised almost entirely on iPads and smartphones, the physical mall is actually a novelty.
It's a destination.
It's a place to see and be seen, a physical backdrop for their social media content. The dossier mentions retailers like Paxson completely redesigning the lighting and layout of their physical spaces just to be more photogenic for TikTok.
It proves that this isn't just a fleeting fad. It is a durable consumption trend born out of deep macroeconomic frustration.
So how do you trade that?
From an investment standpoint, the alpha trade highlighted here is to buy Simon Property Group. You aren't buying just any random strip mall. Simon Property Group owns Class A highly experiential premium malls.
The nice one.
Exactly. They are the direct beneficiaries of this generational search for a physical, tangible antidote to digital isolation.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and think about your own habits lately in the context of this massive shift.
Yeah.
Are you willingly trading shipping speed for a few extra dollars in savings at checkout? Are you finding yourself craving physical retail spaces or just getting out of the house to shop more than you did 3 years ago?
People are definitely craving the real world.
The digital world promised us endless, frictionless convenience, but the physical world is proving that it has a gravity that simply cannot be coded away.
And that gravity is starting to pull down some of the biggest giants in the entertainment and financial industries. Which brings us perfectly to the second major theme of the intelligence dossier.
The rapid commoditization of creativity and professional advice.
Yeah.
This section absolutely blew my mind. Let's look at the entertainment side first, specifically Disney and Pixar.
A huge shift there.
For decades, Pixar was the untouchable gold standard for original, groundbreaking storytelling. They built entire worlds from scratch. But now Disney management is explicitly forcing Pixar to pivot to a strict 2-to-1 ratio of sequels to original films.
No more taking chances.
We are talking about pushing out Toy Story 5 and Incredibles 3. Pete Docter, who is Pixar's chief creative officer, gave a stunningly candid interview recently where he openly admitted to a creative overcorrection at the studio.
Right under his leadership.
Under his leadership, Pixar leaned heavily into highly autobiographical niche films from younger directors, movies like Luca and Turning Red. And while critics love them, they fail to connect with the massive, broad, global audiences that the Disney machine requires to function.
They need massive hits.
The absolute breaking point was a recent movie called Alio, which was heavily autobiographical and ended up losing over $100 million at the box office.
To understand why this is so critical, we have to look at the corporate management theory the dossier applies here.
The Swire analogy.
Yes, the memo draws a brilliant historical comparison between Disney's current strategy and the operations of a legacy Hong Kong conglomerate called Swire.
Tell us about Swire.
Swire is a massive old money business that stubbornly clings to a colonial-era family-like management trainee program in the name of preserving cultural stability.
They refuse to change.
They refuse to modernize their internal structures. Meanwhile, their direct regional rival, Jardine Matheson, recognized the changing market, completely overhauled their structure, professionalized their management from the outside in, and consequently saw their stock massively outperform Swire's over the long term.
So they adapted and won.
The analogy here is that both Swire and Disney are choosing the perceived safety of their legacy past over the hard, risky work of true forward-looking innovation.
So Disney management looks at the massive financial crater of Alio and says, no more artistic risks. Just give us Woody Buzz Lightyear and recognizable IP.
That is a textbook definition of managing a company for decline.
Managing for decline.
Disney is actively choosing to harvest the cash flow of their past creative successes to prop up the massive overhead of the mothership rather than funding the risky, unpredictable creation of new intellectual property.
That's a bad sign.
For a global entertainment company, retreating to sequels isn't a show of financial prudence. It's a glaring admission of creative bankruptcy. It signals to the market that their core internal engine for generating new, multi-generational franchises is fundamentally broken.
So what's the play?
Therefore, the trade outlined in the dossier is incredibly clear. Maintain a heavy short position on Disney. It is a classic value trap masquerading as a growth company.
And it isn't just creative storytelling that is losing its premium market value. It is highly structured professional financial advice, too.
The commoditization is everywhere.
Let's look at the data coming out of the UK. Over half of all adults in the UK are now actively turning to generative AI platforms like ChatGPT and Google's Gemini for complex financial and pension advice.
Over half. That's a staggering number.
The dossier highlights a very specific case study, a 41-year-old software engineer who had a $200,000 retirement portfolio. Instead of paying a traditional financial advisor their standard percentage fee, he simply exported his portfolio data and fed it into ChatGPT.
Just a CSV file right into the chat.
The AI analyzed his holdings, identified that his risk exposure was dangerously concentrated in a few volatile sectors, and recommended a total prudent reallocation into broad market index trackers and stable bond ETFs.
Standard solid advice.
And he actually did it. He executed the massive portfolio shift based entirely on the AI's logic.
What's fascinating here is the structural trap that the legacy wealth management industry is completely blind to. The dossier describes it as a dual pincer movement.
Okay, a pincer movement from where?
From the bottom up, you have governments like the UK now mandating basic financial literacy courses in public schools. This naturally raises the baseline financial knowledge of the average consumer over time. They understand what an ETF is. They understand compound interest.
Right, they aren't totally in the dark anymore.
And from the top down, you have AI platforms providing highly competent, financially prudent, and bespoke basic financial planning for absolutely free.
Free is hard to beat.
This dynamic completely commoditizes the core service provided by tens of thousands of human financial advisors.
If an AI can instantly ingest a $200,000 portfolio, analyze the risk parameters, and recommend a reallocation for free, what does that do to the business model of a traditional advisory firm that charges a 1% management fee every single year just to tell a client to buy an S&P 500 index fund?
It completely shatters that business model.
Mm-hmm.
The 1% fee for basic asset allocation is dead.
Dead.
That is why the Dossier singles out Ameriprise Financial as a high-conviction short target.
Oh, Ameriprise.
Their entire business model relies on a massive army of human advisors, providing the exact type of basic boilerplate asset allocation and retirement planning that AI can now execute instantly and without cost.
They can't compete with free instant software.
Their corporate cost structure, the office space, the salaries, the compliance overhead, is entirely unprepared for a world where their core product is free. The only human financial advisors who will survive this purge are those catering to ultra-high net worth individuals with incredibly complex, bespoke needs involving multi-generational trusts, obscure tax sheltering, and private equity access.
Really complicated stuff.
For the mass affluent, the AI pension advisor isn't the future. It is already here.
It is a brutal reality check. Whether you are Pixar trying to justify a $20 movie ticket or a wealth manager trying to justify a 1% portfolio fee, if your core value proposition can be easily replicated by AI or exhausted by repetition, you are in serious trouble.
And that profound economic vulnerability is playing out against a backdrop of severe global instability. Which brings us to the third major section of the intelligence briefing.
Geopolitical shockwaves and the new macro reality.
The energy markets are flashing red right now.
The numbers in this section of the dossier are staggering. We are currently looking at a massive violent supply shock in the global energy markets, driven entirely by the escalating geopolitical conflict involving Iran.
It's moving so fast.
U.S. crude futures spiked 36%, hitting $90.90 a barrel. The dossier notes this is the fastest pace of increase on record. Average diesel prices jumped 51 cents a gallon in days, and gasoline climbed 32 cents in a single week.
And the shipping routes are choked.
The Strait of Hormuz, which is arguably the most critical and vulnerable shipping route for global energy, is being severely throttled by military tension.
Now, whenever there's a massive spike in global oil prices, the immediate knee-jerk reaction from the mainstream financial market is to assume that U.S. domestic producers will simply spin up their rigs, pump more oil to fill the global supply gap, and capture those incredibly high prices.
That's the usual playbook.
But the triangulated reality in this dossier reveals a deep structural physical limitation. The U.S. Permian Basin, which is the absolute crown jewel of American shale oil production, cannot just turn on the taps.
This is where the physical world rears its head again. I was reading the section on the natural gas pipeline constraints in the Permian, and it is a brilliant insight. Can you explain the actual mechanics of why they can't just pump more oil?
It comes down to the physical reality of extraction and strict environmental regulations.
Okay.
When you drill a well for crude oil in the Permian Basin, you don't just get oil. A massive amount of natural gas comes up out of the wellhead as a byproduct known as associated gas.
Right, you get both.
You have to do something with that physical gas. Historically, companies might just burn it off into the atmosphere, a process called flaring. But due to strict environmental regulatory caps, flaring is severely limited.
You can't just burn it anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
So you have to capture the gas and put it in a pipeline to transport it out of the region. The critical bottleneck right now is that the natural gas pipelines leaving the Permian are completely maxed out.
They're full.
They are at a 100% physical capacity because you cannot legally flare the excess gas and you cannot physically put it in a pipeline. You literally cannot extract the highly profitable crude oil sitting right beneath it. The oil is trapped by the gas bottleneck.
That completely changes the macro picture. The market is assuming America can just drill its way out of this price spike, but they physically cannot move the byproduct.
Exactly. The market is wildly underestimating the duration and severity of this energy shock. The U.S. cannot ride to the rescue as quickly as consensus believes.
So where's the alpha?
Therefore, the dossier advises completely avoiding the crowded, obvious trades in traditional exploration and production companies. Instead, the real alpha lies in power generation infrastructure.
Like who?
The recommendation is to buy Vistra. They are a massive independent power producer. Think about what is happening concurrently with this energy crisis.
AI data centers.
The voracious nonstop energy demand coming from the build-out of AI data centers. Those data centers require absolute 24/7 baseline grid stability. They cannot rely on intermittent wind or solar.
They need baseload power.
Right. Vistra's fleet of physical nuclear and natural gas power plants becomes absolutely indispensable in a volatile energy market where the grid is stretched to its breaking point.
The dossier also outlines a really fascinating niche Latin American play connected to this energy shock. It suggests buying Geopark, a small-cap Latin American oil producer.
That's a very specific play.
The thesis here is that as institutional capital gets spooked and flees the Middle East due to the escalating conflict, that money is going to desperately seek out stable, non-OPEC jurisdictions in the Americas. And Geopark just secured a massive strategic investment from the Galinsky family, a very powerful industrial group.
Setting them up perfectly.
This partnership positions Geopark perfectly to re-enter and capitalize on the slowly recovering Venezuelan oil sector. It is a deep value play based entirely on global geopolitical realignment.
And speaking of geopolitical realignment in the Americas, the dossier details a major unprecedented policy shift. President Trump has announced the formation of a new multinational military coalition called the Shield of the Americas.
You're just targeting cartels, right?
It is specifically designed to combat powerful drug cartels. However, the crucial detail that the market is misinterpreting is that this coalition explicitly excludes Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia from participation.
Keeping strictly to our analytical mandate, we have to look at this purely through the lens of market impact. What does excluding the three largest economies in Latin America from a regional security pact actually mean for investments in the region?
It acts as a massive double-edged sword for regional capital allocation. On one side, the formation of this coalition creates highly specific alpha opportunities in niche defense cybersecurity and surveillance contractors who will be tapped to supply this new military bloc.
Defense contracts go up?
But on the massive other side, it introduces a profound geopolitical and diplomatic risk premium into broader Latin American assets. By explicitly isolating major foundational economies like Mexico and Brazil, you risk severely destabilizing long-standing regional power balances.
You're alienating the big players.
You potentially push those excluded massive nations closer to geopolitical rivals for security and trade partnerships. Assets and infrastructure projects in those excluded countries that were previously priced by the market as relatively stable must now be discounted to account for this new, unpredictable political friction.
That concept of a hidden risk premium, where the market isn't pricing in the actual underlying danger, leads perfectly into the dossier's breakdown of the Dolan Empire.
Oh, MSG Sports.
MSG Sports, the company that owns the New York Knicks and the New York Rangers, is currently exploring a corporate spinoff. Right now, the stock trades at what Wall Street calls the Dolan discount.
Everyone knows the Dolan discount.
Basically, the market heavily penalizes the stock price because the corporate structure is an incredibly tangled, opaque web. MSG Sports essentially subsidizes other massive cash-burning entities controlled by James Dolan, like MSG Entertainment and that massive new LED Sphere in Las Vegas.
The Sphere is a money pit.
The mainstream financial narrative right now is that spinning off the sports teams into a clean, separate entity will fix this governance issue and finally unlock the true multi-billion-dollar valuation of the Knicks and Rangers.
But the second-order Oracle analysis points to a much deeper, completely hidden liability that a simple corporate restructuring cannot fix: the Abu Dhabi premium.
What is the Abu Dhabi premium?
The Dolan Empire, across all of its entities, is deeply fundamentally intertwined with sovereign capital from the United Arab Emirates. You can see it visually with the massive Experience Abu Dhabi sponsorship logo on the Knicks jerseys.
Right, it's right on the chest.
But it goes much deeper into the structural funding they receive for the Sphere project and other real estate ventures. With the conflict with Iran escalating rapidly and violence threatening to spill over across the entire Middle East, that specific concentrated pipeline of sponsorship and development revenue is now at severe immediate risk.
So a corporate spinoff does absolutely nothing to fix the actual structural vulnerability of where their money is coming from.
It is entirely cosmetic. A spinoff just creates two separate corporate entities that are both saddled with the exact same concentrated high-risk geopolitical exposure. The market is entirely mispricing this reality by focusing on the corporate governance narrative instead of the geographical revenue risk.
I short them both.
The trade outlined here is to short both MSG Sports and Sphere Entertainment. The geopolitical risk embedded deep within their balance sheets is simply too high to justify their current valuations, regardless of how the corporate org chart is drawn.
It is a stunning realization. We live in a world so hyper-connected that a naval conflict thousands of miles away in the Strait of Hormuz can directly, fundamentally impact the financial valuation of a basketball team playing in Madison Square Garden.
It is all inextricably connected. Which brings us to our fourth major section.
Brand authenticity and the community moat.
Right. As the digital and physical worlds violently collide, and as these massive macro geopolitical shocks destabilize traditional supply chains, how do consumer-facing companies actually survive and maintain pricing power? The intelligence points to a concept called brand authenticity and the creation of the community moat.
This was easily my favorite part of the entire memo because it highlights how bizarre modern marketing has become.
The burger war.
It starts with a literal burger war. Burger King's president Tom Curtis recently went incredibly viral online. He posted a raw, unedited video of himself taking a massive, messy bite out of a new Whopper. Sauce getting everywhere, no suit, no tie, just looking like a regular, slightly exhausted guy enjoying a fast food burger.
Totally unpolished.
And then he did something unthinkable for a corporate executive. He publicly shared his actual personal cell phone number on the internet.
That is insane.
He ended up taking over 20,000 direct texts and calls from regular customers complaining about everything from soggy chicken nuggets to squished buns.
20,000 calls.
Meanwhile, on the exact same day, McDonald's CEO Chris Kempczynski released this incredibly sterile, heavily produced, high-definition corporate video where he sits in a spotless test kitchen and takes a tiny, delicate, rehearsed nibble of their new burger while wearing a tailored suit.
The contrast is unbelievable.
The internet absolutely shredded the McDonald's video for being fake and crowned Tom Curtis an authentic hero.
It is a flawless textbook example of asymmetric marketing in the modern era. Leadership, especially for massive consumer-facing brands, now requires a high degree of unpolished authenticity.
People want real.
The modern consumer, particularly younger demographics who have been bombarded by targeted digital ads since birth, has an absolute zero-tolerance policy for sterile corporate speak. By being intentionally messy, visibly vulnerable, and radically accessible, Burger King generated massive, highly organic brand lift at the direct expense of McDonald's.
And it cost them nothing.
And it cost them absolutely nothing but the price of a burner phone. It builds deep consumer trust precisely because it feels raw and real.
And feeling connected to the physical roots of a product is exactly what Nike is desperately trying to get back to right now.
Nike has had a rough few years.
Nike recently brought in a new CEO, Elliot Hill, and he is currently on what amounts to a global apology tour. Under the previous leadership regime, Nike fundamentally misunderstood their own brand. They tried to transform Nike from a shoemaker into a pure Silicon Valley tech company.
They wanted to be a tech stock.
They systematically abandoned their long-standing wholesale partners. They pulled their shoes out of the local independent running shops, the mom-and-pop skate shops, the big regional sporting goods stores, and tried to force every single customer to buy directly through the Nike smartphone app.
They alienated everyone.
They alienated their core physical sports base in favor of chasing digital engagement metrics and higher direct-to-consumer margins. Now, Hill is completely reversing that catastrophic strategy. He is flying around the world, rebuilding those fractured wholesale relationships and trying to recenter the brand entirely around the physical reality of athletes.
Nike learned a brutal lesson. Their core competitive advantage was never their sleek app interface or their digital supply chain. It was their authentic, sweat equity cultural connection to the physical world of sports.
It's shoes, it's physical.
And this ties directly into a fascinating piece of sociological research included in the dossier regarding car owners. The New York Times recently published a deep dive into the secret, unspoken physical rituals of highly specific car communities.
I love this part.
They documented things like the Jeep wave, where Jeep Wrangler owners inherently acknowledge each other on the road with a specific hand gesture, or how Mazda Miata drivers will wink their mechanical pop-up headlights at one another when they pass.
When you describe it like that, it sounds like a silly club, but the underlying financial implications for customer acquisition and retention are massive, aren't they?
They are profound.
Yeah.
These physical rituals create an incredibly strong tribal sense of belonging. It is the organic creation of an us versus them dynamic.
You're in the club or you're out.
In an increasingly digitized, heavily commoditized world where you can buy almost any generic product from a dozen different dropshippers on Instagram, These authentic real-world communities form what the Dossier coins as a community moat.
A community moat. I absolutely love that term.
It is a massive intangible asset. It does not show up anywhere on a traditional balance sheet, but it commands extreme pricing power and near irrational customer loyalty. Brands that cultivate or accidentally stumble into these organic, real-world rituals, like Jeep or Subaru or even certain mechanical watch brands, have a durable physical advantage that a digital disruptor simply cannot replicate no matter how much venture capital they burn on digital marketing.
I really want you to think about that concept in your own life. What brands do you feel a tribal, almost irrational connection to? Is there a physical product you buy where your loyalty completely defies logic or convenience, or even pricing simply because of the community attached to it?
That is the community moat in action.
And it is becoming the most valuable asset in retail.
Okay, let's look at a totally different application in the physical world. Here's where the intelligence gets really interesting. We are moving into Section 5 of the Dossier, Frontier Science, Biotech, and the Synthesis Engine.
My absolute favorite section. The medical breakthroughs detailed here honestly feel like science fiction, but the capital flows prove they are happening right now.
Let's start with the research on glioblastoma, which is an incredibly aggressive, notoriously complex, and deadly form of brain cancer.
Historically, the field of oncology has relied heavily on what we call bulk tumor analysis. If we want to use an analogy, traditional bulk analysis is like taking an entire physical city, throwing it into a giant blender, and then looking at the resulting slurry to try and figure out who lived there and what the neighborhoods look like.
That sounds terribly imprecise.
It is. You get a list of the crude genetic mutations, but you lose all the critical context of how the cells were organized. But the research highlighted in this dossier marks a fundamental revolutionary shift towards high-resolution spatial mapping.
Spatial transcriptomics. Yeah, exactly. Researchers are now using a technique called spatial transcriptomics. Instead of the blender, spatial transcriptomics is like using high-definition Google Earth. It allows scientists to map out the exact cellular neighborhood, or what they call the microenvironment, of these glioblastoma tumors without destroying the structure.
They can see the map.
And when they used this Google Earth approach, they discovered something incredible. The tumor isn't just one homogeneous, chaotic mass of bad cells. It is actually highly organized, divided into distinct structured geographical niches.
I was reading about the specific niches they found. They identified 6 distinct structural neighborhoods within the tumor, and the clinical implications of knowing the geography are huge.
Massive.
For example, if a patient's tumor was heavily populated by what the researchers called niche N1, which is a neighborhood full of these specific immunosuppressive monocyte-derived macrophages, that patient had an incredibly poor survival rate. The N1 neighborhood essentially acts as a fortress protecting the cancer.
It builds a wall?
But if the tumor had a high concentration of a different neighborhood called niche N5, the patients lived significantly longer. And most importantly, tumors with the N5 geography actually responded to existing PD-1 immunotherapy drugs, which normally fail against brain cancer.
So it is no longer just about what mutated genes the tumor has. It is entirely about the physical geographic layout of the cells interacting around it.
That realization validates a massive, urgent need for new spatial biology tools in hospitals worldwide.
It changes everything.
From an investment perspective, the alpha trade here is to buy Illumina. They provide the underlying hardware, the genetic sequencing, and the spatial mapping technology required to perform this high-resolution Google Earth analysis. The dossier notes a very specific cluster of recent insider buying by Illumina executives.
They know what's coming.
Strongly suggesting that internal management knows this clinical validation of spatial mapping is going to be a massive sustained tailwind for their core hardware sales.
But the intelligence memo doesn't just stop at observing this discovery. It actually proposes what it calls a killer experiment to actively weaponize this new geographic knowledge.
The synthesis engine. This part of the dossier reads like a high-tech medical thriller.
It really does.
The memo outlines a 5-step experiment to essentially cure the incurable by manipulating the tumor's physical environment. Let me walk through the steps because the mechanics are wild. Step 1, you take a physical biopsy of the patient's brain tumor and you also draw a sample of their blood.
Okay, Zapula.
Step 2, you take their regular blood cells and using advanced biochemistry, you regress them backward into stem cells, specifically induced pluripotent stem cells. Then you coax those stem cells to grow forward into macrophages, creating a personalized army of the patient's own immune cells.
Making their own custom immune army.
Step 3, you use the biopsy data to build tiny 3D organoid models of the patient's specific tumor in a laboratory, and you mix in their newly grown personalized immune cells to perfectly recreate their exact tumor microenvironment in a petri dish.
And here is the absolute genius of steps 4 and 5. Once you have validated that you have perfectly recreated the deadly fortress-like N1 niche in the lab, you unleash a massive automated screening library of thousands of immunomodulatory drugs on it.
Just testing everything.
But the endpoint you are looking for is entirely new. You aren't necessarily looking for a drug that just carpet bombs and kills the cancer cells directly, because that usually kills the patient's healthy tissue too. Instead, you are looking for a drug that forces the physical environment to change.
Changing the map.
You are screening for a compound that chemically evicts the bad macrophages and shifts the geographic signature of the tumor from the deadly impenetrable N1 niche into the treatable, vulnerable N5 niche.
You are literally terraforming the tumor. You are forcing the hostile environment to become friendly.
That is the perfect way to describe it. You are remodeling the microscopic physical real estate so that the cancer is suddenly susceptible to standard, already approved immunotherapy drugs. If this protocol is successfully scaled, it creates a first-in-class, personalized drug screening platform.
A completely bespoke cure.
It moved the entire field of oncology away from testing drugs on generic, decades-old cell lines and moves it into the realm of bespoke, patient-specific structural cures.
But to do that kind of highly personalized 3D spatial medicine at scale for thousands of patients, you need an unbelievable amount of computing power to process the genetic data. And the dossier covers the infrastructure needed for that, too.
It all comes back to compute.
It highlights a new software toolkit called Rapid Single Cell that utilizes massive GPU acceleration to speed up genomic data analysis by a factor of 100. What used to take researchers days of slow, frustrating batch processing on standard computer chips can now be done interactively in real time using specialized graphics processing units.
100 times faster.
Alongside that computational leap, the dossier uncovers a massive new federal grant aimed at developing something called federated learning for cross-ancestry genomic analysis.
We have to unpack why that federal grant for federated learning is so critical. Historically, massive genomic data sets have been overwhelmingly, almost exclusively sourced from people of European descent,
leaving out huge populations.
That means the predictive AI models built on that data are highly inaccurate and sometimes dangerous when applied to other global populations. We have a massive diversity gap in genetic research. But privacy laws make it incredibly difficult to share sensitive genetic data across international borders.
You can't just email medical records.
Exactly. Federated learning solves this. It allows researchers to send the AI model out to the various global hospitals to learn from their diverse data sets locally without ever moving, copying, or exposing the sensitive raw patient data. The model gets smarter, and patient privacy is perfectly preserved.
That is a brilliant solution.
It fixes the diversity gap legally. But both of these breakthroughs require an unprecedented decentralized computational load.
Which brings us back to the physical infrastructure trade. We keep returning to the physical world.
It all requires power and heat management. The trade here is to buy Vertiv. They provide the highly specialized mission-critical power management and liquid cooling systems required for these massive, heavy, AI-driven data centers.
The picks and shovels of AI.
The pivot toward decentralized, privacy-first, computationally heavy genomic analysis is going to require a massive multi-year build-out of specialized server infrastructure. And Vertiv is perfectly positioned to capture that massive wave of capital expenditure.
Before we leave the frontier science section, I have to mention the pain management trial because this could completely rewrite how we handle the opioid crisis.
This one is unbelievable.
There is currently a phase 1 clinical trial for a compound called RTX, or resinifera toxin. It is an ultra-potent compound derived from a specific cactus-like plant, and it highly targets a specific pain receptor in the human spine called TRPV1.
A very specific target.
But here is the critical difference. It doesn't just numb the pain circuitry temporarily, like a highly addictive opioid does. When RTX is injected directly into the spinal fluid of patients suffering from severe refractory bone cancer pain, it physically, permanently deletes the specific neurons that are transmitting the chronic pain signals.
It actually deletes them.
It literally burns away the broken pain circuitry at the molecular level without affecting the patient's motor functions or their normal touch sensations. It is a single-dose permanent ablation of chronic pain with absolutely zero of the addiction risks associated with opioids.
It represents a profound structural paradigm shift in medicine. Across the board, we are moving away from the chronic chemical management of disease symptoms and moving toward permanent physical structural interventions.
Treating the hardware, not the software.
Whether it is terraforming the microscopic microenvironment of a brain tumor to make it vulnerable, or physically deleting malfunctioning pain neurons in the spine, frontier science is no longer about managing the software of the body. It is about fundamentally rewriting the biological hardware.
It's unbelievable to think about the implications. Okay, let's move into our final section before we wrap up today. Market anomalies and the alpha ledger.
Let's do it.
The intelligence dossier is constantly scanning the global markets for severe dislocations between mainstream narrative and physical reality. And the weirdest anomaly in the entire stack involves mackerel, the fish.
The Schrodinger's fish.
The major UK supermarket chain Waitrose recently suspended the sale of all mackerel, citing severe ESG sustainability concerns and modeling that suggested dangerous overfishing in the North Atlantic. But at the exact same time, local coastal observers, fishermen, and marine biologists are looking at the actual water and seeing unbelievable historic abundance. Billions of mackerel are visibly swarming the coasts.
Applying our strict political neutrality rule regarding the validity of corporate ESG mandates, we must look purely at the financial mechanics of this event. What we have here is a classic Schrodinger's fish paradox.
Dead and alive at the same time.
According to the bureaucratic models, the fish is critically endangered on paper, but in the physical ocean, it is hyperabundant. The underlying structural failure here is diplomatic. The various North Atlantic fishing nations simply cannot agree on how to share the quotas, so they feed conflicting data into the models, causing the models to break down entirely.
Garbage in, garbage out.
But the market impact of this break-in model is very real. ESG narratives are actively being weaponized to drive massive corporate purchasing policies, creating artificial narrative-driven supply and demand shocks that are completely untethered from the physical reality of the resource.
So how does an investor actually trade an artificial narrative-driven supply shock?
The dossier suggests buying ADM Archer Daniels Midland. The logic here requires looking at the broader agricultural sector. This same dynamic narrative versus reality is playing out across global agriculture. Highly touted boutique ag tech companies are rapidly failing to deliver on their grandiose narratives of genetic crop improvement and lab-grown alternatives.
Because farming is hard physical work.
As those Silicon Valley narratives collapse against the reality of scaling food production, institutional capital is going to seek safety. It will flee the boutique narrative-driven startups and flood into the proven massive industrial-scale commodity processors like ADM, who operate strictly in the realm of at-scale physical reality rather than theoretical narrative-driven constraints.
Another fascinating anomaly the dossier points out is happening in the prediction markets, specifically a platform called Kalshi. Currently, roughly 65% of all the trading volume on these predictive platforms is just young men making highly leveraged sports bets or crypto gambles.
A very narrow demographic.
But Kalshi is aggressively trying to change their user demographics. They are actively targeting female users, spending heavily to hire lifestyle influencers like Gigi Alcaraz to get women betting on pop culture political outcomes and mainstream economics. For example, they were taking massive bets on whether Taylor Swift would specifically say the word ring during a highly publicized TV appearance.
To the traditional financial world, betting on pop culture vocabulary might sound completely frivolous. But the strategic imperative for Kalshi to diversify its base is quite literally life or death for their business model.
Because of the wisdom of crowds.
Exactly. The entire foundational premise of a prediction market relies on the concept of the wisdom of the crowd. But fundamentally, a crowd is not wise, and its predictions are not accurate if it only consists of one highly homogeneous demographic with the same blind spots.
You just get a feedback loop.
To generate truly accurate predictive financial models that institutions will trust you, desperately need diverse data inputs representing the psychology of the entire population. If Kalshi successfully diversifies its user base through these pop culture markets, it transcends being just another regulatory gray area sportsbook. The aggregate data it generates becomes a highly accurate, incredibly valuable, sellable asset for institutional finance hedge funds and corporate market research.
The anomaly section also flags a couple of deep value special situation plays that require a bit of unpacking. First, there's a legacy financial insurer called MBIA Inc.
This is a wild one.
The broader market is currently pricing MBIA as a stagnant, overly complex legacy business in terminal, unavoidable decline. The stock chart looks terrible, but the Dossier views it as a pure mathematical liquidation play. If you look at the holding company structure, MBIA's parent company currently holds $357 million in pure unencumbered cash.
Free and clear.
That means cash with no strings attached, ready to be deployed or distributed. But the entire market capitalization of the public company is only around $335 million.
So it's trading for less than the cash in the bank.
The raw cash sitting in the bank literally exceeds the market's valuation of the entire company. The stagnant legacy insurance business is completely obscuring the cash pile. This makes it a high-conviction contrarian buy ahead of expected corporate asset sales and massive special dividends to shareholders.
It's free money, essentially.
And then briefly, there's ANGI, the home services and contractor marketplace. The market currently penalizes them, seeing them as a struggling, outdated lead generation business with high customer acquisition costs. But the Dossier notes they just quietly launched a native app directly inside ChatGPT.
Sneaky integration.
By pivoting to an AI-driven conversational customer acquisition model, they are poised to drastically lower their marketing costs and build a much stickier, high-intent user base. The AI acts as a free concierge to book the plumber. The market is completely ignoring the margin expansion this integration will create.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what is the unified theory of this entire triangulated intelligence dossier?
Bring it all together for us.
What we are witnessing across every sector is a massive, violent structural market correction. For the last 10 years, fueled by zero interest rates, the market has exclusively rewarded the illusion of infinite, frictionless digital scale. But that illusion is now shattering against the hard, heavy, unforgiving realities of physical infrastructure.
It's hitting a wall.
We see it clearly with Volkswagen hitting the immovable legal wall of physical auto dealerships. We see it with Amazon's vaunted logistics moat crumbling as consumers choose the reality of cheap physical transport over the illusion of free digital gratification. We see the dream of infinite digital AI power generation colliding violently with the physical limits of the electrical grid, forcing the desperate purchase of physical nuclear power plants.
And in biotech.
And in the realm of biotech, we see the shift from crude digital gene reading to the physical 3D mapping of tumor microenvironments. The companies that will dominate and thrive in the next decade are not those with the best software. They're those that master the physical world, build authentic, real-world community moats, and operate in proven industrial-scale reality.
That is a brilliant synthesis of the intelligence. The revenge of the physical world is the defining macro trend of the decade. But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, deeply provocative thought.
The stablecoin issue.
Buried deep in the supplemental reading stack of the Dossier was a phenomenal piece of investigative financial journalism about cryptocurrency that we haven't fully unpacked yet. It noted that dollar-pegged stablecoins, these are digital tokens created by crypto companies meant to exactly mirror the value of the US dollar, have quietly, without much mainstream fanfare, exploded into a massive $300 billion market.
$300 billion.
And what exactly is backing those billions of digital tokens to keep their value stable? US treasuries. Sovereign government debt.
This is the crazy part.
I want you to really ponder the mechanics of this. Unregulated crypto companies like Tether and Circle are now holding more U.S. sovereign debt on their balance sheets than many actual recognized sovereign nations.
Unbelievable leverage.
Are we witnessing the quiet backdoor merger of anti-establishment rebel digital currency with the ultimate foundational asset of the traditional physical economy? And if so, what happens if there is a massive systemic crypto crash? If these digital platforms face a sudden run on the bank and are forced into a panicked fire sale, dumping hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. treasuries onto the open market to cover their redemptions, does the digital world finally have the structural financial leverage to take down the physical economy?
That is the trillion-dollar question.
It is a terrifying and fascinating thought to leave you with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the second-order oracle. Keep questioning the surface narratives, always look for the triangulated reality hidden in the data, and we will see you next time.